Task 4 talks about adhering to the specific codes of conduct. Task 4 has 14 qualifying criteria. Let's look at Task 4, Qualifying Criteria 7. Describe the required disclosures regarding the provider, product supplier, and financial service. We will discuss the disclosures relating to product suppliers, FSPs, and the financial services provided and/or rendered to clients. We will be covering Section 4 of the Code of Conduct, relating to information to be provided on the product suppliers to the client. Section 5 of the Code of Conduct, relating to information to be provided on the FSP to the client. Section 7 of the Code of Conduct, relating to certain information that must be provided by the FSP when providing advice to the client. Section 15 of the Code of Conduct, relating to the publishing of the Codes of Conduct. Firstly, we will look at Section 4 of the Code of Conduct in more detail. The FSP has a product supplier, or also known as the product provider. The product supplier or product provider provides the financial products which the FSP gives advice on to his or her clients. The product supplier or product provider can be a third party as shown, but can also be the FSP itself. So in summary, an FSP could have an external product supplier or product suppliers, as well as also being a product supplier to itself. The FSP gives advice to clients on different products from different product suppliers based on the needs of the client. The FSP therefore must notify the client in writing about relevant information about the product suppliers or product providers within 30 days. So we need to understand what an FSP needs to inform its clients about in order to comply with Section 4 of the Code of Conduct. So we need to make sure our clients know who the product supplier is and their contact details. Therefore, we must provide the client with 1. The product supplier's name. 2. The product supplier's physical address. 3. The product supplier's postal address. And 4. The product supplier's telephone number. This may seem basic, but it is important that it's done, so the client has all the information he or she needs to know, and providing this information can easily be overlooked. Next, it is important that the FSP informs the client of the contractual agreement and relationship with the product supplier. This is so the client is aware of the FSP and the product supplier's relationship. We need to provide the names and contact details of the product supplier's compliance departments. An FSP must communicate to its client any conditions or restrictions that have been imposed by the product supplier with regards to the type of financial products or services that they as the FSP have rendered. All these are important as they provide the client with an understanding of the relationship between the FSP and the product supplier, so that the client can make an informed decision knowing that the FSP and the product suppliers have a relationship and an agreement with each other. Here we see that when there is a financial interest held by the FSP with the product supplier, the FSP must communicate and disclose this fact to the client. If the FSP holds more than 10% of the product supplier shares directly or indirectly. So when we say directly, that would mean the FSP holds the shares in the product supplier. When we say indirectly, it would mean that we hold the shares in some other way, either through another company or person. It is also important to see that the Code of Conduct extends this to also say or equivalent substantial financial interest. So basically saying that it does not have to be through holding of shares, but if there is a financial interest that is equivalent to holding 10% of the product supplier's shares. The consideration of financial interest also states that if over the past 12 months, the FSP has received more than 30% of its total remuneration from product supplier. These sections are basically there to ensure that the client knows that the FSP has some sort of significant financial interest in the product supplier, so they can at least be aware of that fact when making their decisions. Here is where things can get a bit complicated. Let's roleplay this. Now say we are an FSP as well as a product supplier. And as a product supplier, we also have other FSPs selling our products through some sort of contractual relationship and/or agreement. Then it only stands to reason that we as the product supplier would need to provide all the information we have talked about to this contracted FSP so they can communicate it to their client. Here we can see that we have multiple FSPs that are also product suppliers and have insurance companies that are only product suppliers. An FSP can be giving advice to their clients on products and services from some or all the product suppliers based on the client's need. An FSP can provide and/or render financial services in respect of a choice of financial product suppliers. The FSP must exercise judgment objectively in the interest of the client concerned. This is very important. As we can see from this section, we as the FSP want to inform and notify the client of the FSP's relationships with product suppliers in order to ensure objectivity is maintained and that the interest of the client is always maintained. It is important that the FSP does not make unfair comparisons. So the code states that the FSP may not compare different financial products, product suppliers, product providers, FSPs and/or representatives unless the different characteristics are clearly made. It is important to note that if any comparisons are made, then they cannot and must not be inaccurate, unfair, or unsubstantiated criticism. Next, we will look at Section 5 of the Code of Conduct. Section 5 of the Code of Conduct covers what the FSP must provide and disclose to the client about itself when rendering a financial service. Each of the paragraphs of Section 5 cover the information an FSP must provide and disclose to the client when rendering a financial service. The FSP is to provide the client with full particulars of the information we are going to discuss. If this information is provided verbally, then the FSP must provide it in writing within 30 days. The FSP is to disclose to the client its full business names and trade names, its registration number, its postal and physical address, its telephone numbers, its internet and email address, the names and details of contact persons, and the names and contact details of its compliance officer. The FSP is to provide details of its legal and contractual status and its relationships and agreement with product suppliers. This is to make sure that the FSP makes it clear to the client as to who accepts responsibility of the actions of the FSP and/or representatives in rendering financial services and the extent to which the client must take responsibility. The FSP is to provide names and contact details of its compliance officer and details of its compliance department. And for representatives, the names and contact details of the FSP that the representative is contracted to. The FSP is to provide details of the financial services and financial products it is authorized to render and provide in terms of its license and any conditions or restrictions. The FSP is to disclose if it holds and/or has in place guarantees, professional indemnity or fidelity insurance cover or not. The FSP is to disclose whether a representative is providing and/or rendering financial services under supervision as defined by the definition of fit and proper requirements. Any exemption provided by the registrar allowing the FSP not to disclose any of this information must be disclosed to the client by the FSP. Next, we cover Section 7 of the Code of Conduct. This section deals with the information that an FSP must provide the client with regards to the financial service they are rendering. When an FSP gives advice to the client, the FSP must disclose and provide certain information relating to the financial services being rendered. The FSP must inform the client of their responsibility in terms of providing accurate information. It is important to remember that the client provides the FSP with certain information in order for the FSP to provide and/or render a financial service. Therefore, it is important that the information received from the client is accurate as well. Otherwise, the FSP cannot give the correct advice or financial service. It is also important to note that an FSP may not request the client to sign any written or printed documents unless all the required information has been included or sign a blank document. So here we can see that this sets up the relationship between the parties. The client must give accurate information, and the FSP cannot ask the client to sign anything unless the FSP has provided all the required information per Section 7. The FSP must, at the request of the client, provide a statement of account in connection with the financial service rendered to the client. The FSP must provide a client with a statement of identifying and listing financial products still in existence at least annually. These statements must include specific information. We will explore this information a bit later. Let's start with, when the FSP gives advice to the client, they must provide certain information relating to the rendering of the financial service provider. We can divide this information into 3 categories. 1. General explanations. 2. Material information. 3. Specific disclosure. In terms of general explanations, the FSP is to provide the client with reasonable and appropriate general explanations of the nature and material terms of the contract and the transaction. The FSP is to provide full, frank, and honest disclosure of information that is reasonably expected to be disclosed to enable the client to make an informed decision. In terms of material information, the FSP is to provide the client with material contractual information, facts, illustrations, projections, or forecasts that they have. In terms of specific disclosure, Section 7 of the Code of Conduct goes into detail as to what needs to be disclosed. Section 7, paragraph 1c states, the following information must be disclosed at the earliest reasonable opportunity and time. 1. The name, class, or type of financial product. 2. The benefits of the financial product and how they are calculated, accrued, and paid out. 3. The specific information for financial products marked as an investment product or has an investment component. 4. The obligation to the product provider, nature, extent and frequency of monetary obligation and escalation, increases or additions. 5. The obligation to the FSP, nature, extent and frequency of monetary obligation. 6. Any special terms and/or exclusions. 7. Any guaranteed minimum benefits. 8. How accessible will the funds be? 9. Any early termination consequences. 10. Tax implications. 11. The cooling off period. 12. The nature, extent and frequency of payment of commission, fees and/or brokerage fees. 13. Any and all risks associated with the product. 14. The amount of the increase in premiums over the first 5 years, then the basis of the increase over years 6 to 20 years, not exceeding 20 years. Section 7, paragraph 1c, subsection 3 states that specific information for financial products marked as an investment product or has an investment component needs to be provided and disclosed. Therefore, when a financial product has an element of an investment, then there is additional disclosure requirements that need to be provided to the client about the financial product. Let's go through these disclosures. Firstly, the fees being levied in terms of 1. The amount and frequency of the fees. 2. Who receives the fees. 3. The services or purpose of the fees. 4. Fees based on performance. Then we must include the frequency, performance measure period, and/or other criteria. And 5. Where the structure of the investment has other underlying financial products, then we must include the manner in which the client can determine the net value of the investment. Next, we need to disclose how the value of the investment is calculated and the details of the underlying of other financial instruments. We need to disclose the details on the past performance of the investment as well. 1. On request of client. 2. Over intervals that are reasonable for type of product. And 3. Include a warning that past performance is not an indicator of future performance. We also need to disclose the details of any rebate on fees passed on to the client. Lastly, any platform fees that are being charged to the client. So now we have covered all the elements relating to when the FSP gives advice to the client. What information the FSP must provide or disclose when rendering the financial service. In terms of specific disclosure, Section 7 of the Code of Conduct goes into detail as to what needs to be disclosed. We will now cover facts that the FSP must tell and inform the client of the client's, responsibility in terms of providing accurate information. It is the client's responsibility to ensure all facts disclosed are accurate and complete. Any information completed and submitted by the FSP, the client must ensure it's accurate and complete. The FSP must inform the client of possible consequences of misrepresentation or non-disclosure. Simply put, the results of giving incorrect and incomplete information. The FSP must supply the client, on request, a copy or record of any transaction requirements within reasonable time. So we have seen that the client needs to ensure that they provide the FSP with accurate information and that any information that is used by the FSP is accurate, because any misrepresentation or non-disclosure could have an adverse effect on the advice given and or provided. Next, we cover the fact that an FSP must provide a client with a statement of identifying, listing, and mentioning products that are still in existence at least annually. This statement must include specific information. This specific information is obligations, the ongoing monetary obligations of the client. Benefits, the main benefits provided by the product. Value of the investment, if any. Where a product has been identified as an investment or has an investment component, then the net value of that investment to the client must be disclosed. Commissions and fees. Any ongoing incentives, commissions, fees, and brokerage fees payable to the provider must be disclosed. This statement need not be provided where the client is aware or should be aware that the FSP does not render or has stopped rendering ongoing financial services in respect of the products concerned. We have now covered all of Section 7, dealing with the information that the FSP must provide the client with regards to the rendering of the financial service. Note that this section is long with a lot of details, so make sure you go through it and understand all the requirements laid out. Lastly, we will cover Section 15 of the Code of Conduct. Here we illustrate the authority, which sometimes may be referred to as the registrar, the commissioner, or the FSCA. The authority or commissioner must draft and publish a code of conduct. Once the code of conduct has been drafted, the authority must consult with representative bodies within the financial service industry and client and consumers bodies. The code of conduct must be published in the Government Gazette and then will be binding to all financial providers and representatives. It is important to note that different codes of conduct may be drafted for different categories of clients, different categories of FSPs and their operations in different sectors, different categories of representatives. A code of conduct must be drafted for rendering of a financial service in respect of deposits with a term not exceeding 12 months. These codes of conduct may be amended or replaced from time to time. The amended or replaced codes of conduct will then follow same procedures as outlined above. We have now covered the sections dealing with the required disclosure regarding the provider, product supplier, and financial services. Let's take a look at some questions. Question 1. Zama is a representative of Upshore Me, and she needs to disclose the following with regard to the product supplier. 1. Name, physical location, postal, and telephone contact details of the product supplier. 2. The contractual relationship between the FSP and the product supplier, if any, and whether the FSP has a contractual relationship with other product suppliers. 3. The names and contact details of the relevant legal and complaints departments of the product supplier. 4. If applicable, that the FSP holds more than 30% shares or has the equivalent financial interest in the product supplier, and that the FSP received more than 30% of total remuneration, including commission in the last 12 months, from the product supplier. Choose option A, B, C, or D. Pause the video here if you need some time to read over the question and consider your answer. The answer is option A. This is a bit of a trick question because 3 and 4 may seem correct on appearance but have small mistakes, making them not correct. In statement 3, for example, you need to provide the contact details of the product supplier and not necessarily the compliance department. In statement 4, we need to disclose if we hold more than 10% of the shares, not 30%. You must be careful of what is being asked. Question 2. Disclosures on a financial product to a client that was supplied verbally or orally must be confirmed in writing within how many days? A. 5 days. B. 10 days. C. 30 days. D. 60 days. The correct answer is option C, 30 days. Question 3. Disclosure requirements are probably one of the most important aspects of a financial service that an FSP renders to its clients. As a representative, you need to understand what is required from you in terms of disclosure. Which of the following disclosure requirements must be adhered to? A. There must be adequate disclosures on the product supplier. The disclosure must include the name, physical location, postal, and telephone contact details of the product supplier. B. Disclosure of the product supply information must state the contractual relationship between the FSP and the product supplier to disclose whether the FSP has contractual relationships with other product suppliers. C. A representative need not disclose that he or she is rendering services under supervision. D. Representatives need not disclose detail about the legal relationships between the FSP, product supplier, and representative. Pause the video here and read through the question before deciding on your answer. The answer is option A. There must be adequate disclosure on the product supplier or product provider. The disclosure must include the name, location, and contact details of the product supplier. It is important to use the questions that are covered as a learning tools and opportunities. Take time to read through the questions and understand what they are asking, and learn from your mistakes. So let's go through a final overview of what has been covered. First, we covered the information the FSP needs to disclose to the client about the product supplier. We then discussed the information about the FSP that needs to be disclosed to the clients. We then discussed the disclosure that is to be provided to a client when providing a financial service to the client. Lastly, we discussed the authorities, also known as the registrar or commissioner, requirements with regards to the process of drafting and publishing a code of conduct. We hope you enjoyed the video and learned a lot. Please make sure to check out our other RE videos.